Good evening and thank you for joining us on the hot seat. Tonight we are joined by the ANC party leader, Mheshimiwa Musalia Mudavadi. Karibu sana on the hot seat.
Thank you, Sarah.
How is it going so far?
Well, would I say it's getting hotter?
Is it?
Yes. I think the anxiety levels are rising. And when you look at it in the context of the background of COVID and what it is doing and how it is restricting normal lives, normal activity, it's definitely a matter for anxiety.
Have you been vaccinated yet?
Yes, I am.
And
I've been vaccinated.
how was the experience for you, and would you recommend the public? Because of course there are still conspiracy theories about the vaccination.
Oh, I was vaccinated. And I would tell the public that they should do it. We should not fall prey to these vaccination theories. You know, a few days ago I was reminding people that maybe you and I and many others have already gone through various levels of vaccination. You must have gone through the polio vaccination. We must have gone through maybe the yellow fever vaccination. There are others who went through the smallpox vaccination. There are others who went through the measles vaccination. And there are other problems that we face, and they've gone through vaccination. But why is our population growing? It continues to grow.
So people shouldn't be scared of...
So these are all myths around the vaccination. And we should know that it is in the interest of our lives and our families' lives and our friends' lives that we take all the precautions. So my message to the Kenyans who have not been vaccinated is that get yourself vaccinated at the earliest opportunity.
Fantastic. I think leaders need to speak out more on that, because there's that fear of the young generation fearing maybe they will not be able to sire a generation in future.
But what age was I when I was getting my polio vaccination, as an example?
Yeah.
Or what age were you when you got it?
Yes.
And
It's
so
less
many
than 5,
others.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we are all here, and I have a family, and others have families. As I said, the population is growing. So this is a myth that needs to be debunked.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Now back to your story.
Yes.
Who's Musalia Mudavadi? I mean, we know you as a politician, we know you as the chairman of ANC and a few other things, but who is Musalia Mudavadi besides that?
Well, I'm born in this country. I've had all my schooling in this country. I went to school in Kileleshwa Nursery School in my early days. And then I went to Nairobi Primary School. Then I went to Nairobi Secondary School, and I went to the University of Nairobi. So
how was it growing up in a political family, because your dad was an MP?
But remember, my dad was not an MP throughout.
Yes.
By the way, people tend to forget. They tend to assume that you're just born into a political family. First and foremost, my father was a teacher, and then an ordinary civil servant and education officer before he ventured into politics. So he was not grown into politics. And even he himself, his background is such that they were from a very peasant rural family. His father died, that is my grandfather, whom I never saw, at the age of, he died when my father was 9 years old. So he had his challenges. And I would like to refer any listener to my autobiography, Soaring Above the Storms of Passion, because I then speak about my life history. We would spend time in school in Nairobi, and religiously we were in the rural area for our holidays. That is how life was.
All right.
Yeah, and I was in the private sector for a while before joining politics myself.
So when you were at the University of Nairobi, is this where you grew the desire to join politics?
Um, yes, I was interested in politics. But you know, when you're going through this process, you're going through it with the premise that you will have your own career. And in the very beginning, I intended to pursue my career in matters of economics and business throughout, because politics was my father's job
Yes.
and not mine. Okay, but
Yeah.
sometimes fate puts you into certain
Positions somehow.
positions. Yeah, and that is what happened. So when he passed away in 1989, then I was elected as the MP for Sabatia, and that is how my entry in politics was. But I was always a keen observer of what he used to do.
So you joined politics in 1989.
Yes.
Then in 1992 is when there's the fight for democracy, but you're part of KANU at this point.
Yes.
How was it serving as a young person under the Moi regime back then?
By the way, remember it was the only, we were a one-party state. And I can tell you for free that we gathered a lot of experience working under the Moi regime. And even as we speak now, virtually every key politician at one time or the other may have worked in the Moi regime, including the former retired President Kibaki.
Yes.
Yeah, he was a minister and a vice president in the Moi regime. Uhuru worked in Moi's government. Raila worked in Moi's government for some time. I worked in Moi's government. So did the deputy president. So did Kalonzo. So did Wetangula. You name them. Virtually all these prominent politicians at one time or the other worked with him.
So how was that experience as a young person back then?
I think it was very valuable, extremely valuable. This was Moi as an individual was somebody who was a stickler for detail. He was hardworking. He monitored what his officials were doing very closely. He would advise. He was very strong on disciplinary matters. So that was the kind of experience you would get working with him.
So that tells why you've been disciplined all along, perhaps in the political sector.
Yes, and I think that is what we need in the political sector. We need a heavy dose of discipline. Perhaps we need a vaccine on matters
on politicians.
on politics of discipline here, because when we don't realize the value of discipline, we put leaders who impact very negatively on our society in places of authority. And that can be extremely dangerous. Because good governance is dependent on people who will be ready to respect the rule of law and live up to it. So if we create indiscipline in the leadership of our society, then our society will be exactly what they think they have put in office. I mean, if I became a leader and I'm flouting the rule of law, I'm punching people in the streets, I am glorifying indiscipline. What values are you creating in our children? So they end up saying that when the thug, it is fashionable to be in public office and behave like a thug. Is this what we want in our society? No, we don't. We need to change that. So discipline is absolutely essential. And it goes hand in hand with the posterity of this nation.
And speaking of discipline, I mean, we've had leaders and some of them elected in parliament who have had cases here and there of punching people in the streets. There are several issues that have questions, and one wonders if Chapter 6 of our Constitution still is observed as we get to elect our leaders.
It needs to be enforced more. Because as I said, that is not something to be proud of. Chapter 6 needs to be enforced more so that we can have people doing what they're supposed to do. If leaders make a mistake, they should take responsibility. Can they apologize publicly? If they can't apologize publicly, can they resign from office? You know, these are the questions that going forward Kenyans must be asking so that we live up to the commitments that we make as leaders.
All right, and speaking about the involvement of young people in politics, you joined politics at quite an early age, and you've been there all these years. We're going towards 2022. The key people we're looking at have all been in politics for years. Where do you think is the place of young people in politics?
It's very important. I mean, that is what you call tajriba, experience. And if you had to ask me, I would tell you this. I was not born where I am. I started somewhere.
Yes.
You could enter politics at 28, the way I did. You can enter politics at 50. All right?
Yes.
But what is important is that you learn the values of patience. You learn the value of going through different challenges. And hopefully that challenge, that experience, you can now bring to bear to our society for good and not for the negative aspects of it. So there's a lot of room for the young people in our society. That is why we would say that when you get there, or when you're in a public office, it is important that you nurture the young people as well. Give them an opportunity to serve, induct them into the process. Let them grow in the system. They will make mistakes, but that is all part of the learning process. And then at certain levels, they'll be called upon to make even bigger decisions. But at least let them be brought in. So to me, I think there's a lot of room for young people.
Do you feel you as politicians or leaders that have been there long enough are doing enough to bring more youth, especially to the different parties?
We have no option, by the way. The demographic structure of our society leaves you no option. Whether you like it or not, 60% of our population is between the age of 18 and maybe 39. So you have no option but to work with them.
So what I would want to know is, are political parties in Kenya youth-friendly?
I think so. I think they are.
And why would you say that?
I would say so because, first of all, I see them embracing a lot in terms of technology now. And you can see the younger people are being involved more and more in the decision-making process in political parties. They are influencing more the policies of the day. I, for instance, if I were to talk about ANC. The party leadership that I have is way much younger than I am. You know, the people I work with. Very few are within my age bracket. The majority are younger.
That could be something towards the right direction. But today, if I was to run for a seat, let's say I want to be an MP, there's an amount of money I have to pay to a party, right?
Yes.
Is that financially, are we being friendly to the youth? Because
you see, the youth must also learn to contribute to the institutions that they are joining. Let us not send a message to the youth that theirs is a free ride.
Yes.
It would be wrong. As much as you are young and whatever, but when you go to the shop, do you think that shopkeeper will give you the milk and the bread because you are young for free? No. They will tell you have to pay for it. Because that is how jobs are created. That is how you expand, and that's how you build institutions and create a participatory process. So if there was an affirmative action, yes, you can have some affirmative action in different ways. Perhaps you can reduce part of what they have to pay and as membership fee or something like that. But in reality, I don't think we should give them the impression that it's for free. I was a member of KANU. I became even a life member. I had to pay the fees. Then, of course, now I'm in ANC. You pay the membership fee.
Yes.
Otherwise, how is that party being funded? Watu wasifikiri kwamba kuna mthamini. There's a sponsor huko nje kila kitu. Hapana. If you're a member of the party,
you have to pay.
Be part of it.
That's true.
Yeah.
All right. And speaking of the issues, maybe that you want to go for the top seat, I want to assume. As of now, that's what we know. Maybe with time, things will change. Why would the biggest population, which is the youth, entrust you with that top position? What's your plan?
I hope they're listening to the policies that I'm talking about. I'm talking about focusing on an economy that works for all. What do I mean here? I mean jobs must be created. I want them to have a livelihood. I want them to be able to take care of themselves. That is the ultimate goal. I would be happy to walk the streets of Nairobi or Kisumu or Kakamega or Mombasa and see that young men and women are able to cater for themselves. They're able to feed their families. You remember a few months ago, I said, Kenya is one of the places where you can call a public rally in the middle of the week and your grounds will be full.
Yes.
Why are those grounds full? It's not because they're coming for your statement. It's because there's a very high level of unemployment.
Does that bother you?
That is exactly what I'm saying. Create an economy that works for all. An economy that creates jobs. So that if you're calling a political meeting that is of no value, they will tell you, sorry, we are not going to be there. Because we are engaged elsewhere.
So do you say the Jubilee government has failed?
You want to be able to have somebody who can pay for their own medicine.
Yes.
No? Somebody who can pay school fees for their own children where it is due. That is where the dignity of our society will lie. That is where the strength of our society will lie. All right?
So would you say Jubilee has failed? That's why before the COVID, when we had the BBI campaigns, we have crowds of people.
I think we have to look at it much more broadly than that. there are some challenges, commitments that the Jubilee government made, and it's not able to fulfill them. For instance, maybe they wanted to build so many stadia within a short
6
time
months'
frame.
time.
They wanted to build so many dams and so forth. So they overcommitted. And in certain respects, their record of performance there is not good in some of these areas. But maybe there are others where they have made some strides. If you look at it in terms of some roads, you will admit that yes, they have done quite a number of roads. But ultimately you ask yourself, at what is the cost-benefit analysis of some of those projects? And what impact does it have on the taxpayer? These are questions that you ask at a different level. And each government has its priorities. So going forward, I want to tell you that the economy, a growing economy, must become a priority. We have lost foreign exchange on collapsed tourism. Our export earnings have declined. Our debt is higher. So unless we have a strategy around these things, you may have serious social unrest going forward.
And of course, with the many projects the government has been doing, mostly roads and maybe SGR and stuff around that, it means we've borrowed so much money.
Mm-hmm.
As of January, we had a debt of 7 trillion. Does that bother you, and what does that mean for the economy?
It bothers me. Remember, I'm perhaps the politician who has spoken more about debt than anybody else. I started talking about this debt that is mounting from way back as 2015. But people thought it was a joke. But now you can see everybody is now talking of exactly the same thing that I was talking about. So, my answer, does it bother me? Yes, it does. And it does not bother me today. It started bothering me much earlier. So we have to find a strategy eventually of moderating the impact of that debt on our society. And to moderate the impact means rescheduling, renegotiating those debts so that the burden can be minimized on the taxpayer. You see, earlier when you are talking about it and talk about the debt, everybody thinks ni yule jamaa mkubwa ndio analipa hiyo deni. What they don't know is that it is the revenue, VAT, hapo. If the debt was low and the economy was growing, maybe VAT would be 14%. Now it is 16%. Don't be surprised if it goes to 18% on basic commodities. So we must, and through you, we must help the people to understand that there is a correlation between their basic livelihood and the cost of their food and the public debt. People kept on thinking it's remote. It's not part of us, it's huko. But it should be known that for the government to raise money quickly, it has got to increase taxes on petroleum products.
Yes, and petrol again goes higher.
And that's the multiplier effect, which feeds into the cost of your food on the table.
So now once Wanjiku knows that, yes, it has an impact, what are they supposed to do?
Now, Wanjiku has got to realize that we need leaders who will seriously address this matter. Because Wanjiku is also intelligent. Okay? And we must give Wanjiku the facts. Once Wanjiku has the facts with her, she will make an intelligent decision. The problem is that we have been hiding the facts from Wanjiko. There's been a conspiracy of politicians. Don't release the statistics. There's been a conspiracy in the media houses. Forget about the detail about debt. Go and talk about the simplistic thing. Who is popular, Mr. X or Mr. Y? The conspiracy to hide the issues away from Wanjiko is what we should get rid of, so that Wanjiko can know Musalia Mudavadi for what he is, rather than putting me in a bow tie and making Wanjiko believe that the guy with the bow tie is the perfect guy.
So we've just the other day
I've talked philosophically, but I hope you've got it
I've
right.
gotten your point. Just the other day, we had a hashtag by Kenyans on Twitter telling IMF stop loaning Kenya. That means Kenyans are starting to feel the impact of these debts. But what is it that you leaders are not doing, because you're the people who see in positions of power? I may not get to the president, you may get to him. What is it you're doing to ensure that we're not borrowing more? Because we could be seated here, then tomorrow we hear World Bank has given us another loan,
You see,
IMF has given us
you see,
more.
first of all, borrowing, we will always borrow as a country, and countries also borrow. But we must help Kenyans to understand, and Parliament to also do its bit, to understand what is the risk associated with the borrowing. There is some borrowing which is commercial. And in simple terms, I would say that commercial is like when you borrow at an interest rate of 5% or 7%, and then you have a repayment period of maybe 10 to 15 years. That is expensive money. Now, then you have concessionary money, where you borrow and the interest rate is 1%, and you have a repayment period of 30 years. Okay? There's that kind of money out there. So that is the money we should go for when we are going into heavy infrastructure projects. If we take this commercial one, it becomes very expensive to you and me. Now, this is where Parliament plays a key role. This is where the leaders we put in place play a key role. And this is why I want to commend a piece of legislation by Honorable Sakwa Bunyasi, which seeks to improve and strengthen the institutional framework about public debt management in our country. So these are the things that we can do. And how did we get there? Commitments that are beyond us. When you make too many commitments within a short time frame, and you're not telling people how you intend to finance them, then you're likely to fall into debt. And I think this is what has happened in the Kenyan scenario.
So is there a way out as of now? Because I believe we are all feeling the pinch.
Yes, there's a way out.
And especially now that we're going to budget reading in next month, in June.
I've told you there's a way out. One of it I've said is rescheduling and restructuring of the debt. That is a necessity. All right? The other is to make commitments in a more prudent manner. So it may mean freezing some expenditures. Okay?
Yes.
And suspending some projects that have not been started at all. Okay? So you freeze expenditure, you freeze some things until you have stabilized. These are some of the things that we may be forced to do. And on the IMF line, because I've been there before, I was Minister for Finance in this country, and we must remind Kenyans that we are member states of the International Monetary Fund. okay? And this institution is there to help countries that are going through distress, member states that are going through distress, to help them in moments of difficulty. But it comes with conditionalities, some of which we have hinted, like
Yes.
freezing expenditure, etc. These are some of the conditionalities that you are likely to see, maybe increased taxation, etc. Those are the examples of conditionalities that come with some of the IMF support. But going forward, it's important that Kenyans appreciate that when you have an economy that is well managed and what have you, the preconditionalities or conditionalities of IMF will not necessarily come your way, because then you are managing it prudently. But when there's distress, it's like getting medicine. Okay? Now they tell you that you've reached a stage where you require medicine. And medicine is never sweet. Yeah.
All right. So speaking of the things that we could do to stop it, we're going into an election year next year. What plans are there from ANC to transform the struggle that Kenyans have now? Because, I mean, you're in a party because you want to be president.
It's because I can only tell you the agenda I intend to put on the table. And my agenda is to put together policies that will strengthen and grow our economy so that jobs are created. That is my agenda.
So shall we see you alone, or it's now a thing of one Kenya alliance?
In politics, you have to win by wooing people, by bringing people, by persuading them so that they can vote for you. And therefore, looking at Kenya's political structure, we are likely to see new formations when it comes to political realignment. We have to anticipate this. And by the way, it's not unique to Kenya. Even big economies like Germany are surviving on coalition arrangements. All right? So it's not unique to Kenya. It's a question of what those formations will stand for. What agenda will they be putting on the table?
But is it certain that we have you on the ballots?
All things being equal, I've declared my interest. I am passionate about it. And I hope Kenyans, when that time comes, will have the opportunity to make their decision with me being on the ballot.
So one of the people we've seen you have a meeting with is Gideon Moi as part of the One Kenya Alliance. Then recently we've seen him with Raila Odinga and Mohoho Kenyatta. What does that mean for One Alliance?
Surely, have we reached a stage in Kenya where we say that we cannot talk to each other? Doesn't it border on being parochial, frankly speaking? If you are to ask me, people have become parochial in terms of who to interact with and who not to interact with.
I think it's specific for politicians.
I mean, but even the media is falling prey into this parochialism. I mean, are you telling me that a manager of Barclays Bank cannot talk to a manager of Standard Bank?
Of course they can.
Are you telling me that the head of Safaricom cannot talk to the head of Airtel? Are you telling me that the head of the Nation Media cannot talk to the head of the Standard newspaper? I mean, aren't we going parochial?
So we should stop reading too much?
I mean, it's excessive. It's excessive. I mean, it's bordering on schizophrenia. What were they saying? Perhaps they are discussing dowry. Maybe their children want to get married.
All right.
For heaven's sake, what's wrong with us? I mean, we are pushing it too far. If we want to make a pronouncement about an alignment or whatever, I will speak publicly to it and say, we have been having consultations in the background. We have reached a stage where we want to make certain things public.
But for now, we stop reading too much.
I think we are exaggerating it.
All right.
Yeah, and somebody will be putting me in an awkward position. How do I comment on a meeting that I was not party to? Huh? A reasonable person would know that surely Susan and Sarah and Musalia are seated under that tree. They are talking. I mean, how do I go and ask this young man or young man, what do you think they are talking about?
Well, I think it's the way politics is set up.
So people think that there's a conspiracy theory against Kenyans. You know, this is you know, there's whoever is meeting, there's a conspiracy against another. I think we need to move away from that.
All right. And maybe final question. Do you feel the government has handled the COVID situation in Kenya well, and what would be your rating?
I think they've tried. They've tried very hard because, first of all, they've been forthright in giving information on a regular basis about new infections and who has recovered and the deaths. You have to commend them for that. They have tried to balance between saving the economy and saving lives. They've tried. I think it was in one of your competing stations, somebody said, stop criticizing, tell us, if you are in that position and you are given that scientific data and you are told that this disease is spreading at a higher rate and it is now more lethal in the third wave than it was, if you had that scientific information, what would you do? You know? These are the questions. And I don't want to look at it from a comparative angle in the region. I have to ask you, when the country as big as the US, when the head of state disregarded scientific information, what are the consequences? When the president in Brazil disregarded scientific advice, what were the consequences? So, as much as we may say that there could be areas of improvement, let us be clear that it's not an easy situation for anybody. And therefore, on this one, as much as I am not in government, I would say they have done a fairly reasonable job based on the resources that we have. There are a few challenges around the vaccine. What is critical is that they must accelerate the vaccination process so that, because in terms of percentage, those vaccinated are still very few. When you look at the figures here and look at the figures in some other countries. So whatever logistical issues there may be that are hindering an accelerated process of vaccination, I think those issues should be addressed. Where there is an issue with the private sector, I think they should quickly sort out what might be teething problems, so that if the private sector is supposed to come in, they can come in to complement what the government is doing. But ultimately, remember, the people who bear full responsibility for the lives of Kenyans is actually the government of Kenya. So they must be very cautious on how they do it.
All right.
Yeah.
And finally, your final word to the viewers and the voters of this country. Of course, we're going back to BBI, so on that, and now on the national politics, basically.
For me, the only message I have for the Kenyan people is that make your decisions wisely. Reflect on it. Let us remember that message that the then ambassador to Kenya, US Ambassador Johnny Carson, said choices have consequences. So to me, that is my message to the Kenyan voter. Let us improve our country by making the right choices. That's all.
All right, thank you so much, sir, for joining us on the show. That we've been speaking to the ANC party leader, Musalia Mudavadi, and of course, he shared a lot. Thank you for joining us on the show. My name is Sarah Mwangi.